In Nigeria, a country almost evenly split between Christians and Muslims, you have this incredibly devastating violence. It's gotten so bad that some U.S. lawmakers are now calling it the deadliest place in the world for Christians.
Yeah, it's a really stark claim.
Yeah.
And the numbers being cited are, frankly, alarming.
They are. So today we're diving into the sources behind this. We've got letters from U.S. politicians, official responses from Nigeria, analysis from crisis monitors. Quite a mix.
Right. And our mission really is to understand how these sources paint two totally different pictures of what's driving this suffering.
Exactly. Is it, as some U.S. politicians argue, a systematic, targeted persecution of Christians, almost a genocide?
Or is it, as Nigerian officials and others suggest, something more complex? A security crisis tangled up with poverty, resources, crime.
And the stakes here, diplomatically speaking, are huge. It all comes down to whether the U.S. labels Nigeria a country of particular concern or CPC.
That CPC designation is basically the biggest diplomatic hammer the U.S. has for religious freedom issues. Using it, or even threatening to use it, sparks this fierce debate about American aid, intervention, the works.
Okay, let's start with those numbers driving the calls for action. Congressman Riley Moore, for instance, he cited reports claiming over 7,000 Christians were killed in Nigeria just in 2025.
7,000. I mean, just pause on that. If that figure holds, it averages out to, 35 deaths every single day?
35 a day, yeah. It's a staggering number, and it really forms the core of this persecution narrative.
It does. This view, championed by figures like Moore and Senator Ted Cruz, is that Christians are being singled out and killed specifically because of their faith.
And they try to show it's systematic, not random. Senator Cruz has pointed to longer-term figures, reports suggesting over 50,000 Christians murdered since 2009.
50,000. And alongside that, claims of, 19,000 churches attacked or destroyed in that same period.
Yeah, 19,100 is the figure cited. It paints a picture of deliberate destruction of Christian presence.
And what really adds weight to their argument, from their perspective, are these specific examples where the timing seems explicitly anti-Christian.
Right, like a priest being kidnapped and murdered on Ash Wednesday, or reports of 54 Christians killed on Palm Sunday. The symbolism is hard to ignore.
Absolutely. And in this narrative, the culprits are clearly identified.
Yeah.
Radical Islamic terrorists, mostly Boko Haram and its offshoot, ISWAP, the Islamic State West Africa province.
The claim is these groups are intentionally trying to eliminate Christians and their places of worship.
Which leads us straight to the policy response being pushed in Washington, that CPC designation we mentioned.
So the country of particular concern status, it comes from the International Religious Freedom Act. Basically, it names countries engaging in or tolerating severe religious freedom violations.
And getting that label isn't just symbolic. It forces the U.S. government's hand. They either have to impose sanctions or formally issue a waiver explaining why they're not.
So it gives Washington real leverage over things like foreign aid and, importantly, military sales.
Huge leverage. But, what's really interesting is how unstable this designation has been for Nigeria.
How so?
Well, Nigeria was designated a CPC under the Trump administration.
Okay.
But then the Biden administration removed Nigeria from the list in 2021. And now there's this intense pressure to put it right back on.
So it's kind of a political football almost?
It can seem that way. That back and forth might dilute the signal it's supposed to send to Nigeria. Makes it seem driven by shifts in U.S. politics as much as conditions on the ground.
And that leverage is exactly what lawmakers like Cruz and Moore are after now. Cruz proposed the Nigeria Religious Freedom Accountability Act.
Right, that 2025 proposal. It aims to hold individual Nigerian officials accountable if they're seen as enabling violence or enforcing laws, like blasphemy laws, that harm religious minorities.
And Congressman Moore, he went even further, didn't he?
He did. He urged the U.S. to just cut off all arms sales and technical support to Nigeria. Completely suspend it until they can prove they're protecting Christians effectively.
That's a hard line. And it really escalated with former President Trump's rhetoric.
Oh, definitely. On November 1st, he threatened to, quote, immediately stop all aid and assistance, and even hinted at potentially deploying troops or using airstrikes if Nigeria didn't stop what he called the mass slaughter by Islamic terrorists.
Wow. Okay, so that's very aggressive. Demands accountability, sure. But also, it immediately brings up issues of sovereignty, right?
Absolutely. And unsurprisingly, that kind of talk from the U.S. prompted a strong reaction from Nigeria's government.
Which brings us to the other side of this story, the competing narrative.
Exactly. The argument that this isn't a targeted genocide, but a much more complicated security crisis.
Nigeria's information minister, Mohammed Idris Malagi, he pushed back hard, called the U.S. commentary overly simplistic, a gross misrepresentation of reality.
Yeah. The Nigerian government insists that the violence hits everyone, Muslims and Christians. And they argue that framing it only as an anti-Christian attack is not just wrong, but dangerous.
Dangerous how?
Well, they say it plays into the hands of terrorists who want to divide the country along religious lines. They stress that the insecurity has multiple roots.
Okay, so what roots are they pointing to?
Well, yes, the Boko Haram insurgency in the Northeast, definitely, but also just rampant banditry and criminal gangs operating across large areas, and crucially, these long-running communal conflicts, especially in the Middle Belt region.
Ah, the farmer-herder conflicts. We hear a lot about those.
Exactly, and those are incredibly complex. Often it involves clashes between largely Muslim Fulani herders and communities that are often Christian farmers.
It's about land and water, mostly, not just religion.
That's the argument. Climate change, desertification, it's pushing herders south into farming lands, leading to clashes over scarce resources. So, while religion is part of the identity mix, the core drivers are often survival, economics, land access. It's not always purely ideological.
Which makes labeling it purely religious persecution difficult.
Right. And this is where the data from independent groups gets really interesting. You look at organizations like ACLE, that's the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. They track violence globally.
And what does their data show?
Well, their research found that when you look specifically at the victims of jihadist groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP, most of the civilians killed have actually been Muslims.
Most victims are Muslim. That definitely complicates the Christian persecution narrative.
It does. It suggests these groups attack anyone who doesn't conform to their extreme ideology or anyone seen as linked to the government or, Western ways. That includes fellow Muslims they consider apostates.
So who else are they targeting, besides Christians and moderate Muslims?
A whole range. Government officials, civil servants, traditional leaders, anyone seen as representing the state. Journalists, too.
And they have this deep opposition to certain social institutions, right? Like schools.
Absolutely. Boko Haram literally means Western education is forbidden. They see schools and Western medicine as symbols of the influence they want to destroy.
The numbers there are also devastating.
They really are. Sources report Boko Haram has killed something like over 2,250 teachers since 2009 and destroyed nearly 1,400 schools.
Mm-hmm.
Health workers, especially those involved in vaccination campaigns, are also targeted.
So it's broader than just faith against faith. It's an assault on modern society in a way.
In many ways, yes, but, and this is important, we can't ignore the genuine religious freedom issues that do exist because of the legal system itself.
You mean Sharia law in the north?
Exactly. 12 northern states use Sharia in civil law, and sometimes in criminal law, too. Blasphemy is illegal. This absolutely creates an environment where religious minorities face discrimination and are vulnerable.
And that vulnerability can explode into violence, even outside of organized terror groups.
Precisely. Think about the horrific lynching of Deborah Samuel, the Christian college student, in 2022 over a blasphemy accusation. That wasn't Boko Haram. That was mob violence, fueled by these underlying legal and social tensions, and maybe a failure of local authorities to step in.
Okay. So trying to pull these threads together, we have these two starkly different ways of framing the crisis.
Yeah, two maps, really. One map shows a targeted religious genocide, and the policy prescription is immediate, punitive U.S. action. Restore the CPC, cut off arms, maybe even sanctions.
And the other map?
The other map shows a complex security breakdown, weak governance, poverty, resource wars, multiple armed groups. And the prescription there is more nuanced cooperation, targeted aid, helping Nigeria build capacity.
So the central question for U.S. policymakers and for anyone watching this is about the impact of the chosen approach.
Right. If the U.S. goes with the punitive route, threatening to cut off all aid and military support, does that actually help?
Or does it potentially weaken the Nigerian military's ability to fight the very groups, Boko Haram and ISWAP, that are killing Christians and Muslims?
That's the dilemma. It's the classic tension between wanting accountability and needing partnership. Do you treat Nigeria primarily as a perpetrator needing punishment or as a vital, if flawed, partner in a fight against shared enemies?
Which leaves us with a really tough final thought for you, the listener, to wrestle with.
If the U.S. embraces the Christian genocide framework, restores that CPC designation, and potentially cuts military aid as a result. Aid that helps track and target terrorists.
Could that action ironically end up leading to more violence against the very Christian communities it's intended to protect? Is the cure potentially worse than the disease in this scenario?